Hello, welcome to the latest edition of In the Interim. I'm Interim Dean at the University of Michigan College of Pharmacy. My name is Bruce Mueller, and thanks for joining us at In the Interim. The purpose of In the Interim is to bring really important people in the world of pharmacy and health to the College of Pharmacy in a virtual way to sort of make up for us not always seeing each other in person. And today I am really proud to have Deb Pasko as our guest. She's the Director of Clinical Research and Innovation at Surescripts, but she took a tortuous path to get there. She has done everything. When I first met her, she was the pediatrics ICU pharmacist at the University of Michigan, and somehow she talked me into having her be my very first fellow when I was at the University of Michigan, starting my laboratory, and that was the best decision I ever made. I'm so happy to be able to introduce Deb Pasko to you. Welcome, Dr. Pasko.
Welcome, Dean Mueller.
Oh, enough of that. People are going to think I make you call me that. All right, well, the first question of the show is, what the heck are we looking at here? And what the heck are we? I know what are we looking at?
So the students should know that this was actually a team building exercise. That person in the sunglasses was actually Bruce in his early days, if you would believe it.
There's no way I'm ever jumping out of a plane.
That's actually not true. So, but this is me. This was actually, it was a couple days after an ASHP summer meeting back in, I believe, 2017. And for our meetings, they would usually give us a couple days off when we got back. And I just got up one day and I was like, you know what? I have the day off. What am I going to do today? And I was like, I'm going to go skydiving. So found a place in Baltimore and drove about 45 minutes and did a tandem jump with the guy that you see here. And it was fantastic. It was kind of you only have the oh crap moment, the 5 seconds that, the plane door opens and you have to put your feet outside the plane door. And the guy tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Are you ready to go?" And I was like, "Let's go." And once you jumped, it was the most peaceful, serene feeling I've ever felt. So loved it. Do it again.
Wow. Okay. So we don't always have guests that have good common sense, but but we'll talk to Dr. Pasko about other things, for crying out loud. So you did have a tortuous path. I just say it that way. I mean, from really being a peds ICU pharmacist, but then deciding to go into research with me for a couple of years and do a lot of really cool CRT research. Actually, what I did for the next 20 years was based on the things that you and I did in the lab beginning. But then most people, once they leave a clinical research situation, go on to do, I don't know, clinical research at, in industry or in academia. But you didn't do that either. Talk us through just, a couple of quick steps of some of the things that you've done since then.
Yeah, so, I started out in Ohio, community hospital pharmacist, realized I wanted to be a pediatric pharmacist, went back to school because I originally graduated, sorry to age myself here, if you can believe it or not, with a bachelor's of pharmacy, but realized to be a pediatric clinical specialist, I needed to have my doctor of pharmacy degree and I needed to be specialized in pediatrics. So we moved to the University of Michigan, started working at the C.S. Mott Children's Hospital. But I quickly also realized that if you're going to be at a large academic medical center, research was a pillar of what they do. It's education. And I looked at what I knew how to do. I knew how to be a pretty good clinician, or what I would like to think a great clinician at one point, but I didn't know anything about research. I didn't know how to write a grant. I didn't know how to publish something in a journal. I didn't know even how to run a centrifuge, for God's sakes. So when I started in, Bruce's lab, if you can imagine, there was a -80 freezer and a few miscellaneous things, and that was it. I walked into almost a bare lab. And so here's a person, I knew nothing about research. I knew nothing about how to do any of these studies, knew nothing about how to write a grant. And I started off and through 2 long, torturous years that I have to say, looking back though, in all seriousness to the students, that fellowship was a pillar and the foundation of my career. it was a turning point for me. I went back to a clinical career at the University of Michigan that I knew how to do research at an extremely high level. I was asked to give presentations domestically and internationally based upon things that we did at the University of Michigan. But then lo and behold, in 2009, I decided to take another turn in my career, and we were building a new children's hospital at Michigan. And one of the leads for that came to me and said, "Hey, Deb, I need a project manager and I need a clinical person because I don't have anyone clinical on my team. Could you think about doing it?" And I said, "Well, sure." And I was already helping design the new pharmacies that were going to be in that building. But I was like, how am I going to do that and do my day job as a pharmacist? And she's like, "You're not." And I was like, "Huh?" I'm like, "I went to school a lot of years and I went through that fellowship to do what I'm doing. And you're saying I'm not going to be a pharmacist." And she's like, "Actually, no. You would now be within the hospital administration team." And that took a lot of thinking, and a lot of good discussions with mentors like Bruce, like Jim Stevenson, like others that I have, throughout my career. And I decided to do it. It opened doors for me that I never thought possible as a pharmacist. As a pharmacist, literally day 2, somebody walked in my office and plopped down 5 stacks of plans that were literally probably almost a foot high of architectural plans and said, "You need to learn how to read these today." And it was like, I felt a little like fish out of water, like that first day of my fellowship. But I went back to, what do I know how to do? And I had good foundations of, I can do this, I can figure it out. And I did. And I went on to be a project manager that we moved in a whole entire OR floor. I learned about air exchanges. I learned about, IT things, biomed departments that were way outside the pharmacy realm. And
it wasn't
it was
nephrology research, so I can never forgive you for that.
Yeah,
but all that stuff you learned
wasn't.
moved you to a new. I mean, you went over to ASHP, and
Yep.
and you wouldn't have been able to go to ASHP as a director of medication safety and quality if you hadn't done all this other kind of stuff.
Yeah. So that led me to a national pharmacy organization that, if you didn't know, has, I think ASHP has close to probably at least 60,000 members now, between pharmacy students, pharmacists, et cetera. Pharmacists literally all over the world are part of that organization. And on day 2 of my job at ASHP, my phone rang, and literally on the caller ID, it said the White House.
All right, we're stopping you right there because, first of all, that's not believable. Second of all, I want to remind the audience that if they've got any questions, to go ahead and use the Q&A function or chat it to me. Or if you want to just undo your microphone, we can talk too. We're a small enough group here. But I don't usually do this for this program, but I'm going to do it here because it really sounds like Deb's not telling the truth, except here's a picture. I've got a handful of pictures that you sent to me. And what are we looking at here?
So this is President Obama and Dr. Michael Botticelli. This was the first town hall meeting that was in West Virginia in 2015, the middle of the summer, in a small school auditorium, talking about the opioid crisis. This was the first time we heard about that the US has an opioid epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Botticelli,
you took this picture?
I took this picture. I was sitting in the second row.
Yeah, cool.
So our CEO of ASHP had a conflict and he could not attend the meeting that day. And he came to my office and said, "Deb, could you go on my behalf? You have to go through special security clearance. You have to go a day before the meeting. You have to get a ticket. You have to do all these things. But here's your invitation." And there I am.
I don't have to ask you twice to do that. All right. So I then saw this picture that you sent me, and there's that same guy there's in the middle, that Dr. Botticelli.
Yeah, Dr. Botticelli. So Dr. Botticelli was essentially what we used to call, no longer we use this term, but it used to be called the drug czar. He was over programs within the White House administration, like, the opioid epidemic. So this is a panel of people, and if the students recognize someone at the far right end,
Oh, I
that is the
recognize him right away.
famous, yeah, who is that, Dean Mueller?
That's, of course, everybody knows that's Macklemore.
Yeah. So Macklemore was invited to the White House that day. These were in the executive offices that once I went to that first town hall, I was then invited to several meetings after that and participated in an opioid work group with the White House. And Macklemore, if you didn't know, went through an addiction with opioids and is still fighting that today. People that do go through addiction never are completely out of it, as they will describe it. It's an everyday battle and struggle. I personally have a connective tissue disease that I've had my fair share of joint surgeries, and I've had to use opioids. And I know what a slippery slope that can be. But Macklemore was there on behalf of speaking out, and he also did a documentary with President Obama in the documentary talking about what needed to be done to help patients with the opioid crisis.
Okay, so to be fair, I didn't know who Macklemore was, so I just looked at the thrift shop video. That was really educational for me. Was he a lot like the thrift shop video, or was he different?
So he's different. He's a plain guy, just like you and I walking down the street. Well spoken, but very down to earth, humbled by what he had been through, and just wanted to make a difference, like everyone sitting on that panel that day. Each one of them has a story to tell, including Dr. Botticelli, which himself at some point was addicted to alcohol several years ago.
Wow. All right. Tell me about this one. This is sort of this is your life kind of a question, but let's see.
So this is my life. This is part of my life. 2017, I was invited to be a speaker at a conference, the Patient Safety Foundation, and it's called the Patient Safety Movement. At that conference, President Clinton and then Vice President Biden, now President Biden, were both speakers. And as myself being a speaker there, we were all invited to meet with President Clinton for a short period of time. And we were able to get pictures with him and tell him a brief little bit about ourselves and why we were there as speakers.
He was really, I saw him at the ISMP mid-year meeting. He was really an impressive individual. And this is that same meeting. Here's Biden.
This is the same meeting. This is Biden. And I have to tell you that hands down, President Biden is one of the best speakers I have ever heard. And that's putting a high standard on it, because I've heard quite a few speakers at this point. But he spoke that day. He was slotted for 45 minutes and he went over by an additional 45 minutes, and nobody in that audience could care less because it was so good.
Wow. And so you took these pictures. Oh, but then it looks like here's you on TV.
So while at ASHP, if you remember back in 2018, we went through the hurricane that went through Puerto Rico, if everyone remembers that. So seems kind of far ago,
that's
given
where all
what
the
we've been
IVs in
through.
the world are made in Puerto Rico.
But yeah, guess what, students? If you didn't know, there are over 50 pharmaceutical companies that sit on a small island known as Puerto Rico in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. Whoever thought that was a smart idea, I'm not really sure why. But
tax
back in
evasion,
2011, the national government gave people tax credits to relocate there. Well, the pharmaceutical industry jumped on board, but lo and behold, we realized that we do not have a duplicative system with our most precious commodities like IV bags.
Yeah, and so you're on TV being interviewed.
I'm being interviewed.
Channel 7. I wish I had the video. Channel 7, they're on.
Yeah, Channel 7 News came in and said, hey, we want to do an interview with somebody. And my boss called me up and said, hey, Channel 7 News is here. You're going to be on in like 30 minutes. I hope you have a jacket to wear. And so I'd always kept a blazer in my closet at ASHP because we never knew when we were going to be asked to do something like that. There would be frequent times our federal government or federal relations people would walk in my office at the beginning of the morning and say, hey, Deb, you have to come to Capitol Hill today. And I would literally just have to wipe all my meetings and go with them and talk to senators, representatives, executives, et cetera, about different topics like, opioids or antimicrobial stewardship, antibiotic resistance, IV shortages, you name it, I got pinged for it. And, at ASHP, I have to tell you, it was a great job. It was something different every single day and never a dull moment.
So you were there for 4 years as director
Yep.
and senior director of medication safety and quality, which was, and I think your pediatrics background is great because I think it's the children who really are at risk. We do some crazy things with kids. So you were really the perfect person at the right time, at a time when a hurricane goes through an opioid crisis. You got a good sense of timing. What'd you take away
Yeah.
from all that?
I took a couple things away from that. One, it was that second day when I got a call that said the White House, and it really was actually the White House. They meant to call my boss's office, and they somehow got my line. But I realized that I was no longer just Deb Pasko. When I went to meetings like that you just saw there, I wasn't the voice of Deb Pasko. I was the voice of 60,000 members. I was the voice of the students that are listening today. I was the voice of you, Bruce. I was the voice of my previous bosses. That what would pharmacists want me to be saying? What would you want me to be advocating for in this situation? What do you want me standing up for our profession and advancing our profession? And realized that, sometimes that was a heavy weight, but many and many more times it was more uplifting and a passion that I just carried with me everywhere I went. And there would be times that I would sit in those meetings, and sometimes I would look around at people that were in the room, and I would literally pinch myself to be like, is this actually real? Am I sitting beside this person? But it's, you can do anything. You can get in any situation. You can network with the right people. You just have to want to do it.
Well, you had no special training. I mean, you were a Ohio Northern Polar Bear BS pharmacist as this all starts. And then you and I are working on cow blood experiments in my laboratory you're sitting hanging out with Obama and Clinton and Biden, for crying out loud. So, but you didn't stay at ASHP.
I
So,
didn't.
oh my goodness. So let's go next.
All right. So next, why didn't I stay? I loved my work at ASHP, but there was also something that I loved that I wanted to know more about. That if any of you saw, there was an article that came out, I think it was USA Today a couple years ago, that data is now the world's best commodity. It's no longer oil, data. So think for yourselves a minute. How many times a day do you think that you look at something that could be called data? What is data? How do we use it? How do we make decisions by it? What do we do with it with patients? These were all things that, again, like research that I didn't know anything about, I wanted to know more about, and I wanted to make a difference. And I spent so many years in talking about those drug shortages. I actually wanted to help pharmacies that were going through these things and figure out how they could use data to help solve their problems. So I got connected with Jim Stevenson, one of my previous, bosses, chief pharmacy
One of our
officer.
previous guests.
Yeah, previous guests. And Jim was like, Deb, we have this position open at Omnicell that sounds like something you would be interested in. And I applied for it, interviewed, and the next thing I knew, I was moving to Pittsburgh. So I ended up overseeing a team of approximately 13 people that comprised of clinicians being pharmacists, as well as data scientists and data computer people. And it was learning, drinking from the fire hose like never before in my career. I mean, I went from a nonprofit association to I am now in corporate America, where you have a roadmap and you have business goals to meet and you have a profit and loss statement and you have a budget. And if you don't meet your deadlines and you don't do what you need to do, you're either going to have one upset customer or one upset boss, or maybe both.
And was it fun?
It was a blast. So I learned, the 5 V's of, data about value, veracity, volume, all of it. And I learned it in a short period of time, but I did what I needed to do. But what got me through that was I was working with people that I had been networking with for years, chief pharmacy officers, directors of pharmacy around the country. Mass General Chris Fortier, I knew him from my ASHP years. I knew people in children's hospitals, Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, Children's Hospital of Orange County, Texas Children's. If you didn't know, Texas Children's is one of the largest pediatric children's hospitals in the world, close to 600 beds now. You want to talk about using data effectively and making a difference in patients' lives? That is the epitome of what you can do. And a company like Omnicell, learning about the autonomous pharmacy vision, that's a vision that Jim Stevenson, I remember sitting in his office, 15 years ago and talking about that and how it could make a difference for patients. So I feel like I'm still chasing that dream. I will forever be what I consider to be a seeker, of just wanting to learn more. But I chose to actually leave Omnicell, and everybody's probably thinking, well, you had all this data, you had all this that you wanted to do. Why did you do that? And hey, Deb, you were only there for a year. Sometimes you have to remember that we may get in situations that cultures don't always fit. You go and you work places and it has to be a good fit for you and it has to be a good fit for them. And if something upsets that balance, you have to take a step back and say, is this the right place for me? Am I doing what I want to do, how I want to do it? And I was doing what I wanted to do, but I wasn't necessarily doing it how I wanted to do it. So it was a hard decision to leave. But, again, I reached back out to mentors, had conversations, had brutal, hard conversations, and decided I needed to make a change. And it led me to Surescripts. And Surescripts now, guess what? It's in my title again, if everyone didn't see that. Research.
What is, we don't all know what Surescripts is. We're pre-pharmacy students here. So Tell me, what's Surescripts?
Surescripts is a health information exchange network. We are one of the most predominant ones in the country. When you go to the doctor and the doctor electronically prescribes a prescription, and that prescription gets transmitted from point A to point B, we are the network that it goes across for that transmission. So,
you gather that data, you have that data.
Yep.
What happens to it?
And so we used to be what we considered to be a transactional company, that we just did that. We fostered a transaction from point A to point B. But now we have literally billions of data points that we can look at: who got the prescription, what physician wrote it, what was the dosage, what was the indication, what was the patient's disease state, where did they get it filled, when did they get it filled. So now you start to get in a world of things like medication adherence. Well, I can actually look up and see when that patient picked up their prescription, or did they pick it up? I can look and see, did they take it as it was prescribed? Did they pick it up when it was supposed to be at 60 days? Or for some reason, did they pick it up greater than 60 days, which tells me they're not taking it the way that they were intended.
But who wants to know that? Like, Surescripts doesn't care.
So Surescripts kind of cares. But we are becoming a company now that we want to help our providers and our pharmacists better understand what's happening with these, what we consider to be like insights. Now, we have so much data that we want to talk about these things, of things like, how can we make price transparency? If a provider is ordering a medication for a patient, how can you provide them information in real time about how much that prescription is going to cost that patient when they go to the pharmacy? How many of you have walked in a pharmacy and you've heard a patient be like, what, $100? I don't have $100. We now offer products that can help with situations like that. And that is where Surescripts is really starting to branch out, that we're no longer a transaction company. We are now providing products that are workflow solutions and data insight solutions for providers and pharmacists. And it's to help all of you work at the top of your license, so you aren't worrying about things like getting faxes anymore or spending time on a phone call, where you could just send a message back to the provider to say, I need to clarify this, instead of picking up the phone. You could send a text message. There's so many ways that we could use electronic solutions now instead of phones, paper, things that we know are antiquated, but yet as a healthcare system in 2021, guess what? If any of you are getting a COVID vaccination, you get a paper card, with your vaccine on it. Versus how many of you have a smartphone of, why can't I have my vaccine on a smartphone to say, hey, here's my information. This is it. Those are things that we are trying to do at Surescripts and move the needle, because we have to get out of this just antiquated world when we have so many electronic solutions that are literally available at our fingertips now. And that's
really,
what I do.
Yeah, none of the systems talk to each other.
Yeah.
But in this case, it certainly would,
so
facilitate that.
Yeah, interoperability. That's the buzzword, right? So, Epic, Cerner, big EHRs. Well, when those go through systems, if you're going through like to CVS or Walgreens, yeah, CVS talks to every CVS and Walgreens talks to every Walgreens. But does CVS talk to Walgreens? Do they talk to Rite Aid? No.
They don't talk to Epic either, so you can't tell if it's the right thing anyway.
Exactly. So it's like, we think we have all these great solutions, but yet we still are so far off. I mean, EHRs are 20 years behind where we should be. And, sorry if anybody works for any of the EHRs out there that I'm offending, but, it's like we have the solutions, but it's the adoption of those solutions that we're just still really lacking behind.
So I want to focus this to some of the audience, the pharmacy and the pharmacy students. Why is it important that you're a pharmacist?
It is important that I'm a pharmacist, because when I sit down and work with product teams, I'm working with engineers, data scientists, all these people who are not clinical people. They don't understand when we're making a product that I say, oh, could you incorporate this into the PDMP? So if a provider goes in to look up the opioid history for this patient, they don't have to do 5 extra clicks to go outside of a system to look at something else because it's not connected. The product team doesn't understand what 5 extra clicks means to a clinician. I know what it means. It means that I take patient or time away from the patient. Every administrative thing that you do like that takes time away from the patient.
How could somebody in the audience get a job stage? It's like, what's the path? Because your path is not the one to follow. I can't take that many fellows for starters. So, but we've had a couple guests now. I've tried to get into technology and big data, Bruce Chaffee, Jim Stevenson, and others. What's the path? They all of them are self-taught. Every one of those people, including you.
We are self-taught. However, that can change. I know that I've heard Bruce Chaffee talk about it. I've heard Alan Flynn talk about classes that they are offering through the university with informatics. There are now informatics residencies. I think there may be some informatics fellowships even. I know when I was leaving Omnicell, we were just starting one, that you now have choices that you can learn how to be a pharmacist, and you can learn just as much clinical information as I did, but you can also learn cool things like how to sit down and write code in RStudio, or, have one system build an interface that connects with another system. And who better to do that work than pharmacists who know about the medication and know the patient? Like, that's utopia to me. That's the ultimate
So
solution.
you think there's job growth and there's job opportunities for
I think
students.
There's a huge job growth in these areas that we can't right now, Surescripts, we can't hire people fast enough from engineer, data scientists, clinicians to get our products, our roadmaps where we want them to go. The last year during COVID, if COVID has taught us anything, it is that product innovation has to pivot so rapidly. And to do that, you need resources, you need time, you need people, you need the right people, not just people who's going to sit in a seat and warm it up. You need somebody who has the knowledge, that can hit the ground running, that has a very short learning curve and knows exactly what to do and what's needed.
I can't say it any better than that. So we've got time for one more question. And I think I want to kind of go back to what's your background. You are somebody who clearly just jumps. And your career has been one who's moved on from this thing to this thing to this thing. And they were all good positions to begin with, and you jump to the next one. How do you know when it's time to move? How do you have the courage to jump out of the plane, jump into the next job, quit a job you're very happy with when you're hobnobbing with Bill Clinton? Like, what goes on in that head of yours?
Well, everybody, this is why I did a fellowship with Dean Mueller. He reads people like nobody better. This is why I loved working with him. And that picture is exactly why I put it there, is because I jump. That jump is still because I'm a seeker. There are times where I need to feel challenged. I need to feel like I'm making a difference. And if I ever get up in the morning and I feel like I'm not making a difference, I have to ask the hard question of, am I doing the right thing? Am I in the right place? Could I be doing something else or doing it differently? And if the answer to that is yes, I owe it to myself to at least think about it. I may not do it. I haven't jumped everything. Like, I jumped a lot, but you have to know all the things that have been presented to me that I haven't jumped at.
Well, how do you decide?
Almost nearly as much. You have to sit down. I work with an executive coach, actually, to this day. And one of the things, every time I've changed jobs, my executive coach has told me, you need to sit down, and I take a piece of paper. On one side, I write my personal goals. On the other side, I write my professional goals. Those change. They're not the same that they were 5 years ago, maybe even 3 years ago. And at some point, I've put the paper together and I flip it over and I look at it. And then I literally start making a grid of what's the highest importance, what's the highest impact. And it's the things that go in that.
Any of us can do that at any time. There's nobody in the audience who couldn't do that very thing that you said. I want to thank you for being a guest, great guest, crazy background. I want to thank you for being here, because I think I learned a lot, and I'm still never going to jump out of a plane. I'm sorry, I'm just going to do it. Would it be okay if anybody in the audience contacts you to ask questions about your career or anything else, jumping out of airplanes?
It's my phone. My phone, my email, I'm always open to it.
Right.
I'm always passionate about giving it back and paying it forward. So happy to answer personal or
then
professional.
We are putting so I have on the screen your personal email. Anybody can reach out to Dr. Pasko with questions about her career path. And I want to invite our audience to tune in for our next webinar I'm going to have Dr. Lisa Bernstein on. She's a Senior Vice President of Pharmacy Practice and Government Affairs at the American Pharmacists Association. So another association person after Dr. Pasko here. So please be ready to tune into that. And with that, I want to thank the audience for being here. And thank you again, Dr. Pasko.
Thank you. Appreciate it.